Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Purpose and Pixie Dust podcast. My name is Lindsay Dollinger, and I am so excited to be here today with our guest. She is a PR strategist, and her name is Dina Behrman. So, Dina, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Very excited to be here.
Yes, and we are across the globe. So, Dina, where are you coming in from today?
I am in London, UK. So,
Awesome.
I work with clients globally and very pleased to have the means to be able to connect with people all over the world.
I know, it's really awesome, isn't it? Like, just to think we had this ability to do this pre-COVID, but I feel like it has just expanded so much more since that, which has been a real blessing for everyone, I think. I'll actually be in London in a week. We will be landing in a week for a couple of days. So yeah, I'm like super excited to go back and visit. Yeah. So Dina, tell us a little bit about you. How did you start doing what you're doing? How did you get to doing what you're doing? And we'll go from there.
So I started out as a journalist, and I did that for about 10 years. And I initially launched my business as a side hustle, and I was doing kind of copywriting and PR. And I found that there was a bit of a gap in the market for business owners that weren't ready to hire a full-blown PR agency to outsource their PR to. And so I started focusing on coaching people in PR and doing PR courses and programs to teach and empower entrepreneurs to do their own PR and to get featured in the press. And so I've got 2 children, and after my eldest was born, I sort of had a bit of time off, came back to work. This was around 2015, and I just had this renewed sense of purpose, and I had been doing my business, as I said, as a side hustle, and I really felt like it was time to go all in on my business. And I'd had enough of the journalism, like it had been amazing, but I felt like I'd done 10 years of that and it was ready to move to the next thing. And so I started focusing on my business as a full-time business, and things just started to grow from there. And getting myself out there and getting visible was a big part of that in those early stages.
Absolutely. So would you mind sharing with us a little bit of how did you do that? Was it mainly social media? Was it networking? What was kind of your strategy on getting visible?
I think the first thing was really sort of having a mindset shift around seeing myself as an expert and not being scared to put myself out there, because I'm more of a natural introvert. And so it definitely didn't come naturally to me to feel like, oh, I'm just going to go and tell everyone about my business and put myself out there. But I really had got myself into a situation with my business where I was really playing small and I wasn't putting myself out there. And that ended up with me kind of just taking on work from whoever kind of came to me. And I ended up feeling very kind of overstretched because I was undercharging and was taking on, non-ideal clients. And I just realized something had to change. And as I said, it was kind of like after I'd had my eldest daughter, I had this sort of renewed sense of purpose. And I really wanted to be able to put myself out there and get my business out there and make it a success. And so I started, first of all, really changing my mindset around seeing myself as an expert, and also the idea of putting myself out there and knowing that, it doesn't have to be about being salesy and pushy and that kind of thing. Actually, you can show up and share value and be of service, and you get to help people that way. So I started actually pitching myself to different publications because I'd been doing it for my clients, but I just hadn't done it for myself. And I know that I think that happens a lot where we're good at helping other people to do things, but we don't always even think to do it for ourselves, or we put ourselves at the bottom of the list. And so I started, I got featured in places like Forbes and Entrepreneur magazine and Huffington Post. And I just started really putting myself out there, getting featured, building up that kind of credibility and expert status, and then getting myself out onto different podcasts and things like that, which really helped me to grow my business, to become more known, to have that credibility part, but also to get in front of new audiences and bringing clients that way.
I love that. So I'm curious with the mindset, because there's so much of what you just shared that I personally have experienced and my clients experience as well. Was there some like turning point for you? Like when did you just wake up and be like, okay, I need to work on my mindset because I am capable of doing this thing and why am I not doing it?
Yeah, I had been working with a business coach, and she had said something to me around like, what resource do you have that you're not fully using? And it was just like this wake up call. It was almost like I needed someone to say to me, like, I was here helping people to get more visible and get featured, but I wasn't doing it for myself. And it was like I didn't see that as something for me. And I think sometimes people have that. I know I speak to people and they're like, I feel like it's for other people. PR is for other people. PR is for people that are already super well known or they have a really large following. And so I think that probably was at the back of my mind that, well, it's not really for me. And when she said that, it was kind of like, this is crazy because I know how to do this and I'm just as worthy of getting publicity as anyone else. And I think that was probably the moment where I was like, I need to start seeing this in a different way and realizing that why isn't it for me? Like I have value to share, I have stories, I have expertise, I have wisdom. And I've got to be making use of this for myself as well. And thinking about the people that I want to reach and the people that I want to serve. Sometimes when we make it all about us, it can feel really uncomfortable, the idea of like self-promotion. But actually, when you think about those people that you want to reach and to show up for, then you have to put yourself out there. They're not just going to randomly find you.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest thing is not being the best kept secret. And I've heard that someone, I don't even remember where I heard that. And it has been in the back of my mind since then for a while. So I'm like, I always tell myself when I'm getting nervous about pitching myself or putting myself out there, like, don't be the best kept secret because you are going to help someone. Just like you said, like you are worthy of doing the things, like just do it. Just do it. Okay. So I feel like a lot of my audience probably has not even dipped their toe into the realm of PR. So we're taping this in 2023. In 2023, what are some good places to start for PR? Is it online publications, in print? Does it kind of depend on your niche? Podcasts? What does that kind of look like if someone was coming to you to work with you for the first time and is like, I'm clueless. What is this?
Yeah, so I would say look at kind of what you want to achieve with PR, because you can use it as a really good way to become the expert in your field, to build up your credibility. So I worked with one woman who she was doing well in her business. And she was on social media a lot, but she just really wanted specifically that credibility piece. And so we focused on those publications that have the very sort of recognizable publications that are seen as being very credible, because then you get the third party endorsement from being associated with those media outlets. So start thinking about like, what's your main focus? Why would you want to get publicity? And is it something where you want to be seen as an expert? Well, some really good ways to be seen as an expert are writing guest articles where you're the expert and you're sharing your knowledge, you're sharing your tips and advice, or being interviewed on a podcast where you get to share some of your knowledge. So start by thinking like, what do you want to achieve through publicity? And then you can reverse engineer it and think about, well, what are the PR activities that are going to help me to achieve those things? But in terms of just getting started, I love having quick wins because I think that PR can feel like this really big thing and it's going to take ages, and it doesn't have to be the case at all. So something like just starting pitching to podcasts, and even if it's pitching to people that are in your network who have their own podcasts, that's going to get you some great experience. And then you can use that. You can start pitching to bigger and more well-known podcasts because you will have had that experience already. So just starting to think like, what would be something simple that I could get started with, whether it's pitching to a podcast, submitting a guest article or a guest blog post. And again, there may be, someone in your network who has a blog, and that could just be, if you've never done any kind of PR before, that could be a really great place to start, just to try out writing and, start building up like those pieces of coverage that you can then use and share with other places and say, okay, I've written this for this blog. I'd love to write something for yours.
Yeah, that's great. So do you recommend to your clients that they already have like their own website, or do you ever work with people who maybe they just have a social media channel and that's like the front facing part of their brand?
Yeah, I mean, you ideally want somewhere that you can send the readers or the listeners or the people that are seeing you in the press. It doesn't have to be a website. I did have a client who didn't have a website, and she got featured in tons of media. She was in like national newspapers, magazines, blogs. And she had, I think, a freebie that people could sign up for that was just hosted on its own kind of page. It wasn't a proper website. So you just want to think about how can you bring the people that you're getting in front of into your world. So one lady I worked with, she was really active on Instagram, and she had a piece in, I think it was Cosmopolitan magazine, and they shared it on their Instagram and tagged her, and she got 1,000 new Instagram followers just from being tagged when this story came up. But it made sense for her because she was very active on Instagram. So that was a great place for people to come to. I had another lady that she had a Facebook group that was very active. And so when she had an online article, it mentioned the Facebook group in there. And as a result of that, she doubled her Facebook group in like 48 hours. She brought in $12,000 worth of sales from these people joining her Facebook group. But again, it made sense for her because that was the place where she liked to show up. So just think about, if you don't have a website, where's the place that you like to show up where it would make sense to invite people to come and follow you and, you know, get to know you better.
That's great. Yeah. Cause I feel like there's so many times that even when I have guests on my show, they don't have anywhere for me to send people. I'm like, well, how can, I always ask that question at the very end of the podcast. How can everyone connect with you? Where can they find you? And they're like, oh, you can go to my Instagram, I guess. Like, no, like have like some sort of plan where we can send people, whether it is something that you pay for, like a website or, your freebie. I think a freebie is great depending on your audience and what really makes sense, like you said. But yeah, having some idea where you can send people so they can find you and follow up afterwards.
Yeah, because that's the thing,
like
you want to continue the conversation. So yeah, if they're hearing you like being interviewed on a podcast or whatever it is, reading your article. I had a lady who reached out to me fairly recently after hearing me on a podcast, and she was like, I was driving in my car and I was listening to your podcast. Oh, well, it wasn't my podcast. I was being interviewed. I was listening to you being interviewed. And she was like, I just knew that I wanted to work with you. And so she then went and like looked on my website and booked a call with me. So you just want to have some way that you can continue the relationship and bring those people into your world, whether it can be like social media, like the place where it makes the most sense for you, where you like to hang out. But like you say, you want it to be somewhere like specific that you can tell them, okay, this is the place.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Let's talk super quickly about pitching, because I feel like this is the part where a lot of us get in our heads. What are a couple tips that you have for writing that pitch to send out to be publicized, or, to pitch yourself to be in a magazine, podcast, etc.?
I think when you are pitching, it's going to be slightly different depending on which type of media you're pitching, whether it's a podcast or a magazine or whatever. So I think the biggest piece of advice I can give you is to think about the place that you're pitching and think about what would be a great fit for them. Because I think if you can offer them something where they can almost imagine, so say you're like pitching a magazine and you pitch a really great feature idea, if that journalist can almost visualize seeing that feature in their magazine, they're going to be much more likely to say yes. So if you can try wherever you're pitching to pitch something that just feels like it would be a really great fit for that specific place, then you're going to have a much higher chance of the person saying yes, because journalists in general and podcast hosts as well, they're being inundated with emails and they're super, super busy. So anything you can do that's going to make their job easier is going to make your chances of success much higher. And also, if you're almost doing as much of the work for them as possible. So if you're making it so that they can, if the journalist is going to go and speak to their editor and say, oh, we've got this idea for a feature. Well, if they can visualize it in the magazine because you're offering something that is such a great fit for them, then it just makes their job so much easier. They can go to their editor and say, oh, this would, fit really well with what we're doing. And this would go in, this section, and I can see how this would work. So you want to be, as much as possible, kind of providing that for them.
Love that. Love that. Now, once you do your interview, write your guest blog post, whatever it is that you are doing, is that kind of the end of that relationship, or do you suggest to your clients like to do something else, follow up? What's kind of your strategy there?
Yeah, that's such a great question, because I think so many people feel like that's the end and like, oh, I've done it and that's it, and I'm just going to wait and see what happens and hope for the best. Yeah, I do recommend following up. And that's something that I always help my clients to do, because you don't want to feel like you're being pushy or needy or desperate or anything like that. So definitely like following up. And when you are confident in your pitch, then you can be confident that when you're following it up, you've offered them something great. And so you're just checking to see, like, I know that this is going to be a great fit for you. Like, are you going to be interested in this? And there's nothing wrong with doing that. You're not like sort of convincing or persuading. It really is just knowing that life gets busy for all of us, and we miss, what it's like when your inbox is busy, and like we miss things, don't we? And like, so sometimes the email's been overlooked, or they were out of the office, or they were off sick or whatever. So absolutely follow up, but make sure that you're very confident in the pitch that you've sent, so that you know that you're not having to kind of persuade them. It really is just like following up. Were you interested in this? And then in terms of like, is that the end of the relationship? Actually, when the article or the interview comes out, you can get in touch with that person and thank them for having you or featuring you or whatever, and just keep that relationship going, because then often there are going to be opportunities in the future where, they might want you to come back on. Say you've been interviewed for a TV news program. They need guests, they need experts. And so if they've had you on once, chances are they're going to want you to come back again. So like, keep that relationship going. It's the same with if you've been interviewed on the radio. I used to do a thing on my local radio station, because we have the BBC here in the UK, and they have lots of different local radio stations, and they would get me to come back on because it's just easier for them to use someone that they've used before. So you want to keep that relationship going. Again, if it's like an article, you can pitch them something new.
Love that. I love that. And I never even thought about radio. Radio is just like completely over my head, because I don't listen a ton anymore, because I listen to podcasts a lot when I drive.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's another
yeah. And it's not a million miles away from a podcast, but it's just like, it means that it's getting out to, different audiences.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Absolutely love that. So if someone reached out to you right now and was like, Dina, I would like to work with you, explain kind of what that process looks like to our listeners, because hopefully there will be some of them reaching out to you. So is it done for you? Are you doing more strategy? What does that look like?
Yeah, so the way that I'm working with clients at the moment is I have a group program called PR Power, and that takes you through the process of everything that you need to know to pitch the press and to be featured, and then how to leverage that media coverage to actually grow your business as well. So that's a program with pre-recorded modules, and we have live Q&A calls so that you can get that feedback and get your questions answered. And then I also have options for one-to-one, where I do like a done with you. So I'm working really closely with you to help you get featured. And it's the closest thing to sort of having me on your team. But I'm still empowering you to understand how to do the PR yourself. Some of my clients, they get maybe a VA on board if they have a VA or a team member that they're already working with. But I'm all about, making it easy and simple so that you can fit it into your schedule, because I know that we're all so busy, and the thing that puts a lot of people off is thinking, I don't have the time for this. And so that's why I love starting, like I mentioned, like with the quick wins, really making it something that you can do and go out there and get that consistent media coverage so that it's working for you as well. Because once you get featured in the press, I had someone contact me the other week who found me via an article that I did for Forbes over 2 years ago. So once you put in that effort and proactively pitch the press and get yourself out there, it's going to keep paying off for you. It's going to be out there for people to find for years to come. But it is about just like fitting it into your schedule and making it simple.
Yeah, that makes sense. I used to work with a coach, and I think it was Thursdays, like every day of the week had a different theme, and Thursdays was her like PR pitch day.
Yeah,
And so
I
she
love
was
that.
like, make it part of your business to do that every week. And I did it
Yes.
for a while, and I have been bad about it recently. And I'm like, oh, I need to get back to my Thursdays pitching and PR just to make sure. Cause it's like you said,
Yeah.
we do it for other people's businesses, and it's so easy
Yeah.
to put your own business to the back burner, but this is such a huge part of it to get more visible, get that credibility, get more clients, all the
Yeah,
things.
and it's always worth it. Like it always
Mhm.
pays off, and you don't ever know like which are going to be. Sometimes you'll have a piece and it will go viral, or
Mm.
you'll have one and you get 10 people booking discovery calls or whatever it is. So it's just worth doing it on a consistent basis, because then you give yourself the best chance of having those different results. It's always going to be working in your favor. There's going to be something positive that happens like every time you get featured. And I love that idea of like literally like blocking the time out and saying like Thursday is the day I'm going to spend time on it, because it will pay off.
Yeah, you have to make it part of your strategy. And I like that you said that too. You never know which one's going to be your big one, like that's going to be more
Yeah.
successful, because I made like a promise to myself very early in my business that even if it was a podcast that was just getting started, like it didn't really matter, and I got asked to be a guest on it, I was going to say yes, because I'm like, there is no bad PR, as they say. And I'm like, why not? And I also remember appreciating when I was still very much a small podcast and starting out, when, I was reaching out to people to be guests on my show, and some of them would say no, that, my show wasn't big enough or blah, blah. And that was very hurtful. And I'm like, hey, you know what? Because this is long term, and I still have people going back and finding people from episodes, like you said, 2-3 years ago, because it's out there forever. And I'm like, you missed your chance. You could have been on it.
I mean, as long as it feels aligned, like if it's a podcast or whatever, if it feels aligned, then absolutely do it. And you don't know which are the ones that are going to take off. And like you say, sometimes actually it's good going on the earlier ones, because then they have a longer life.
Yeah.
They're like out there for a really long time and people can find them.
Absolutely.
I had a client that was on a podcast that didn't have a huge following, but it just so happened that a TV producer was listening to that podcast and contacted her. It was a big network here in the UK, and wanted to talk to her about investigating a whole new TV series based around what she did. And you would never have guessed that would have come from that particular podcast, because you just don't know who's listening.
Yeah. And they can pull something really small out of what you said and make a connection. Yeah, you never know. So I love that so much. Okay, before we tell everyone how to connect with you, where to follow you, all the things, I like to ask a couple rapid fire questions at the end to my guests. So no pressure, they're super easy. Morning routine, nightly routine, do you do neither, both? What's your jam?
Yeah, so morning routine, I don't do it all the time, but when I do it, I have a 5-minute journal, which is where you write like what you're grateful for that day, and then 3 things that would make today great. So it really gets you to focus on, it's like the gratitude part, which I think is just so important, but also it's like what's your kind of focus for the day that you want to make sure you achieve. And sometimes it can literally be things like drink more water or move my body, but just making sure that you're having that focus to make your day the best that it can be. So I love doing the 5-minute journal in the morning, depending on how much time I have. Sometimes I do kind of longer journaling sessions. Sometimes I do a bit of EFT tapping, and I'll just like find different videos on YouTube. I love Brad Yates. I don't know if you've heard of him. He does tapping videos.
Awesome.
Like every subject you could think of. And so it's tapping on those different acupressure points on, around your body, it's shifting your energy, but he has them for like all different subjects. So you can do them on whatever's coming up for you. So I like to do them.
I love that.
And evening routine, I probably don't do as much. Like in the 5-minute journal, it does have a space where you can write like 3 amazing things that happened today. So sometimes I'll do that, just have that reflection kind of on the day. but I'm definitely more of a morning person. I love to get up in the morning, especially if my kids are still asleep, and I can get up and like get some stuff done and like have my coffee and do a bit of journaling.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I'm definitely gonna have to start adding the tapping in. I don't even know why I never thought about pulling up YouTube videos and tapping, so I'll have to look up Brad Gates.
Yeah.
Awesome. Favorite personal development book or business development book, or maybe what you're currently reading? Because I know it's hard to pick a favorite sometimes.
So at the moment, I'm rereading Jen Sincero's "You Are a Badass,"
Mhm.
which I know is such a popular one, but I read it a few years ago, and then my friend was reading it and kept like reading out passages to me, and I was like, I think I need to reread this because I'd forgotten a lot of it. So I'm reading that, which is just amazing because she writes in such a fun,
Mhm.
light-hearted way, and sometimes I think that I love self-development books, but sometimes they can feel a little bit heavy. And I think she
Yeah.
does it in such a fun, light way. So I love that one. And then my other all-time favorite is Think and Grow Rich, because I just
Ooh,
think it's so timeless. And
yeah.
there's like, I've reread that. There was also a film that came out around that.
Oh.
And that was great because I watched it with my husband, who isn't necessarily into self-development, and it just really
Mhm.
made it very accessible.
Yeah.
And so I love that because it has the actual like real life examples from, successful business owners. And I love seeing what other people have done to achieve
Yeah.
success and knowing that it's possible.
Yeah, 100%. And when I realized how long ago that book was written, I was like, "What?"
Yes.
I'm like,
Yeah.
"How is this
It's incredible.
possible?"
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
just so timeless. Like everything that
Mhm.
you read is like, this is amazing information. It
Mhm.
doesn't feel old fashioned at all. I think it's
Yeah.
all so, yeah, it's all so relevant now.
And some things never change. I mean,
Yeah,
the basic principles of stuff I feel like just doesn't change,
yeah.
which is spoken in that book. Okay, last question. Favorite vacation spot that you have been to, or what is on your bucket list that you would like to travel to?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, I have family out in San Francisco, and I went there years ago. It must have been about, I don't know, 15 years ago or something. So I really want to go back.
Mm.
And I actually went round like the west coast of America. We had at
Oh,
the time hired a car, so I'd like to do something like that again and see more of the
cool.
country. So
Oh, very cool. Did you do just
yeah.
California or did you go all the way up to like Washington, Oregon?
Just California.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'd
Yeah,
have
it's a
to
big
do a bit
coast.
more. Yeah, this is the thing. In the UK, like, we're so much smaller and
Mhm.
everything's kind of like an hour or so away. So,
Yeah.
yeah, there's so much to see in the States.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely like to go back.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. Well, thank you so much, Dina. I know this has been so good for all of our listeners. So please tell us, where can we connect with you? And I will make sure to put all this in the show notes so people can just click and go right to find you.
Yeah, so my website is dinabehrman.com. I've got a free Pitch the Press guide on there, which is a really good starting point. If you want to start thinking about pitching the press, it's got over 70 different story angles in that guide. So you can download that from my website. And then across social media, you can find me. It's Dina Behrman in all the places.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much, Dina, for your time again. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.